Hello everyone, and welcome to this last video on the medieval era. We're going to just continue to re-emphasize some prior points just to keep everything very well nailed down. If you think you've heard everything in this video before, do not skip through it. At the end and in the middle, I will be giving some homework and other assignments, so please continue to watch all the way through to the end of this video. Some of the very specific topics that we discussed are labeled here. We discussed castles, and we discussed how only kings and nobles could build castles. And I also discussed how the castles we see came about really about the 900 to 1000 year period and lasted in importance and actual use to about 1300. After that point, they were no longer necessary, nor could they fulfill their mission because of the use of artillery and cannon artillery specifically. We talked about the nature of kingship. We talked about how kings started out as absolute rulers and saw how Charlemagne, King John, and King Henry V were different, and the differences between them as their amount of power and capability shifted and changed. We talked about warfare. We observed how knights fought. We've talked about the Battle of Agincourt. We took a look at the Crusades. We saw how when the knights fought in battle, they fought as a unit together, that medieval battles were very slow type of affairs and that they were not very quick. However, at a certain point they slowed down. They were about 45 minutes to an hour long because the armor was very heavy. You could get very weighed down. But horses were not charging at full gallop and breaking through the lines, not like you would have seen with a Mongolian army, let's say, or cavalry, because of the fact that the armor was so heavy. We saw at the Battle of Agincourt that knights who fell on the ground a lot of times suffocated or suffered a lot because they would fall in the mud or fall on the ground and could not turn themselves over, and so they couldn't breathe properly and would die on the battlefield. And if they didn't die on the battlefield, then, well, as a result of falling, they would be killed through what it was called the coup de grace, which was the knife driven through the eye or through the back of the head in the ear area in order to quickly render somebody dead who could not pay their ransom price. We saw how, medieval fighting was fairly dirty, non-glamorous or romantic. It was often very brutal, very harsh, and very subject to the weather and to other elements. We looked at the Crusades, and when we look at the Crusades, we need to remember that, and always constantly bear in mind, that they were not wars of religion. They were not wars directed at somebody because they simply didn't share the same faith. The Crusades were launched because of military need to recover the lands for the Byzantine Empire. We also noted that there was a problem with the feudal system at this point and that there were too many unlanded nobility and knights and peasants. And so the Crusades provided an outlet for these people. And the second remedy for that was actually the Black Death. So at the time of the Black Death in 1348, there were basically too many people in Europe. Europe could not support the population that it had grown to. And so when 50 million people died, even though it's tragic when anybody dies and it's not a good thing, yet it did relieve the pressure on the population, and many animal species that were in danger of going extinct were actually brought back from extinction because of the reduction in hunting, the reduction in deforestation, and other events. And so the Black Plague did serve a purpose, and prior plagues and outbreaks have served as a bit of an adjustment, a bit of a reset button on humanity to kind of operate as an opportunity for new things to take place. And it also reminds us that we're not the only ones to experience pandemic and have many different impacts from it. Finally, we looked at feudalism. Feudalism has many big themes throughout all of this, and we looked at feudalism in the broad manner, and then we've looked at it through its smaller parts. And so feudalism gave everyone a place in society, gave them a job to fulfill, gave a role. It fed more people and gave people longer, more productive lives. People could now not only feed themselves, but they could feed their families. They had surplus food, so they could feed a larger population. The land was better as a result. It was more productive. And people's life expectancy increased from, let's say, 50 years or 40 years to 60 years and 70 years. So it was a remarkable turnaround in society in general. So feudalism had a very beneficial impact upon Europe and society, and in many ways brought about the world that we know today. All right. As your final for the term and for basically this year, every student is to identify one aspect of the medieval period that we have studied, and is to write in no less than 250 words on their favorite topic that we have studied, and to make application to their life. So this is open topic essay, and by that I mean that you can choose any grand, large topic, crusades. You can look at a particular person, Pope Urban II, King John, King Henry V, Charlemagne. Maybe there's another king, maybe one of the Edwards, King Edwards, or King Henry I, or King Henry III. Write an essay that is no less than 250 words on that person or topic, and make application to your life. So for example, let's say you were to write on the Black Death, the Black Plague. So you would write 200, no less than 250 words, meaning that you need to write 250 words. That is the minimum requirement to even score a point on this assignment. Now you're going to write about it, some kind of effect. The Black Death killed 50 million people. It saved many animals, blah, blah, blah. And then you are, for example, to say, how does it compare with COVID-19 today, and how we are dealing with our current pandemic and crisis? Or maybe you want to write on castles. So you will write no less than 250 words, more would be great, on what is important or meaningful about the castle to you. What would you use the castle for today? What is the point of a castle? And if you built one today, how would you use it? I mean, is it functional for living? Is it functional for living and being a business? How would you utilize that? Or let's say kingship is something Let's say just kingship in general. If you were a king and you ruled a people, so in 250 words, you need to talk about the concept of rulership. Would you be absolute? Would you be limited? What is an example if you were a limited king, if you wrote a charter, what is something that you would include for all people as a guaranteed right or freedom as a part of being the subject of the king? And it can be anything, but try to make it serious. Try to not make it like I'd give everybody ice cream every single day. All right, so that's not a right. That's not a privilege. That's just fantasy, and it's not even healthy. So something that you would honestly give people, I would give people freedom of speech. I would give people the freedom of movement. You know, give me something that is tangible, something that is remarkable and can be used in good faith and with good results. Thank you, and once I receive all of those essays, you may consider yourself relieved from history classes for this term. Have a great and wonderful summer.